Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Katie Starr, and I am with the Standlee Premium Western Forage marketing team. Standlee Premium Western Forage is a family-owned business located in southern Idaho with ideal growing conditions to raise some of the best quality forage in the country. We're here to serve you and your animals with consistent, high-quality nutrition and valuable education to keep them happy and healthy. First off, I would like to start out by saying that we hope you are all staying healthy right now and getting some good quality time in with your horses and other animals. We want to let you know that Standlee Forage has been designated as an essential business right now, which allows us to continue to manufacture and distribute high quality forage to ensure that you have what you need to feed your animals. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact our customer service team. The contact information will be available on the final slide of the presentation. Aside from that, we'd like to welcome you to our educational webinar titled Meeting the Right Requirements. What do I need to know about balancing my horse's diet? Owning horses is an expensive hobby and lifestyle. When it comes to what you're feeding your horse, are you meeting their daily nutritional requirements? How can you improve the quality of your horse's diet and get the biggest bang for your buck? Balancing your horse's diet shouldn't be a balancing act. We're going to show you how to do just that on this webinar. Additionally, vet care costs can get pricey, but what if you can improve the overall diet and gut health of your horse to help minimize the impact of those ailing conditions? What if forage is the answer that you've been looking for? We're glad you're here to join us to learn more about this topic. If you happen to be new to joining our webinars, we'll take just a minute to go over a few items so you're comfortable with viewing and participating in our webinar. If you're viewing this as a recording, feel free to skip over this section. As a heads up, we will have a couple of poll questions throughout the webinar that we will pause the presentation for you to answer. We will also be giving away some free product coupons at the end of the webinar, so you'll want to stay with us till the end. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. Clicking on the red box with the white arrow allows you to open and close the control panel anytime you'd like during the presentation. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed for you. You will also have an opportunity to submit questions via text to our presenter, Dr. Cubitt, by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. Please feel free to send in those questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect them and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And just depending on how many questions come in, we may not be able to address all of them within our time frame, but we will certainly use them for future nutritional pieces and connect with you one-on-one if you reach out to us. Additionally, we have attached a couple of nutritional white papers associated with today's webinar that you can download from the control panel under handouts. The first white paper provides an overview of our discussion today, and the additional white paper covers some things we should consider during spring pasture turnout, which is timely for us right now, for horses suffering from insulin resistance, Cushing's, or even if they're just an easy keeper. For those of you that are viewing this as a recording, go to standleeforage.com under Nutrition and Nutritional Resources to find the nutritional white papers titled Meeting the Right Requirements, What Do I Need to Know About Balancing My Horse's Diet, and Spring Pasture Turnout, What We Need to Know. Here's a screenshot of our website to see where you can find some helpful educational content that we have under nutritional resources, including past webinars that we've recorded. If you go further down, you'll see other nutritional white papers and more. And that's all I have from an introductory standpoint. So please welcome Dr. Tania Cubitt with Performance Horse Nutrition, who serves as one of our Standlee Premium Western Forage equine nutritionists. She has a PhD in equine nutrition and reproduction. And with that, I will go ahead and let Dr. Cubitt share a little more about herself before she begins the presentation. Hi, Dr.
Hi, everybody.
Cubitt, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much. Technology is fantastic. So I want to reiterate what Katie said, and I'm excited that you're all on this evening. I know we're in different times, and I want to applaud Standlee for having been doing these webinars. So now it's just business as usual. We continue to be able to disseminate information to our audience, and I want to thank you all for getting on. I, like many others out there, homeschooling my children and trying to balance that work and family. So, but we're all in it together. So hopefully we won't hear any little children run in and ask for anything. Tonight, though, we're going to talk about meeting the right requirements and what do I need to know about balancing my horse's diet. Just like life, balancing the horse's diet is very complicated. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually give you some real examples. But in order to start delving into this topic, we first need to know what horses need to be healthy, right? We need to know how can we optimize the horse's diet with forage. And then, as I mentioned, we talk about optimizing the horse's diet all the time with forage, but today we actually want to give you some real life examples of how can you do that. And are there certain uh, disease states or health states that we can improve with forage? And finally, none of this means anything if you can't source good quality forage. So I'll share with you a little about the Standlee principles and where you can find it. Look at their website so that you can always rest assured that you can always find quality forage. So what does your horse need to be healthy? Well, if you look at the digestive system, and we're not going to go through the digestive system tonight because we've done that in other webinars, but just know that 65% of the equine digestive system is designed to digest fiber. So the whole hindgut from the cecum, the large colon, the small colon, and the rectum, that whole part of the digestive system takes up 65% of the total digestive system, and it's primary purpose in life is to digest fiber. So fiber in the form of pasture or hay is necessary for digestive health. Pasture is fantastic if you can source it. There are many things that a horse will get out of pasture. If they have room to roam, large enough pasture, they'll get exercise. If they're out at pasture for about 24 hours, they can roam up to 8 to 9 miles. If we cut that back to about 7 hours, then we're going to significantly decrease the amount of exercise they're getting, 2.5 to 3 miles. And then, of course, if they're out with other herd mates, then behavior, socialization, manners can all be part of that being out at pasture. Horses will comfortably consume 2 to 2.5% of their body weight in dry forage per day. Okay, so when we talk about the amount of hay that a horse needs to eat, and we're talking about 2 to 2.5% of their body weight, and we say that equates for the 1,000-pound horse to 20 to 25 pounds of hay per day. Hay is 90% dry, so we use the same value. But if you're using pasture, and especially spring pasture, as your primary source of fiber for your horses, you have to realize that spring pasture is 80% moisture. So they have to consume significantly more pasture in order to get that 2 to 2.5% of their body weight in dry matter. So that's where we get the calculations that a horse at pasture needs to have 2 to 2.5 acres but for themselves, and that has to have 75% coverage of good quality pasture. So not all horses have that available to them. We know that fiber is the most important part of the diet. We know that fiber comes from forage and pasture, but pasture is unreliable, whether it be drought, whether it be seasonality, availability. There are pitfalls to forage. Even if we have all the pasture available to us, I live here in Virginia and I have 45 acres of pasture, but most horses couldn't have access to it because it's so lush, and if you had a horse with metabolic syndrome, then now would not be the time to turn them out. So where are they going to get their fiber sources from? Now, how are we going to optimize the horse's diet with forage if pasture is not accessible to us? So again, I mentioned the percentages of body weight that a horse needs to eat per day. Absolute bare minimum is 1% of body weight. So that's 10 pounds of forage as dry matter. So we can kind of go back and forth between hay and this value. Hay is primarily dry. So we can say 10 pounds of hay per day will give you that 1% of body weight. But at 1% of body weight, the horse is going to develop stereotypical behaviors, stable vices, gastric ulcers, all kinds of nasties, probably lose body weight, but it will keep the gut moving. It will keep those peristaltic contractions, keep the forage moving through the gut, but it will not be healthy. If I have a fat horse, typically I'm going to feed them about 1.2% of their body weight, so that would equate to 12 pounds of hay per day for that 1,000-pound horse. Know that every time you decrease the amount of fiber that you're feeding the horse, you have to more intensely manage that, because our whole goal is to mimic what is natural for horses, which is natural grazing behavior. Even though we put them in stalls and we feed them hay and grains, we still have to mimic grazing behavior with our feeding management practices. So fat horses are actually very difficult to feed because we're feeding minimal calories and fiber in order to get them to lose weight, but we still have to mimic that natural behavior. So more typically, we're recommending between 1.5 to 2.5% of body weight. So that's 15 to 25 pounds of dry forage or hay per day. So that leads us to our first poll question.
Thank you, Dr. Cubitt. So our first polling question is, have you used a slow feeder hay net before? And the options are yes, no, or not yet, but considering it. Please go ahead and just select your best answer there. None of the answers will be seen by other attendees, but we're going to go ahead and review all the answers at the end once the poll is closed. Okay, it looks like most of you have answered, so we're going to go ahead and close the poll now. So let's see, I'll share this with everyone so they can see. Dr. Cubitt, 57% said yes, they have used one before, 40% said no, and 3% said not yet, but considering it.
Excellent. These slow feed options, as you can see here in the graphics here, we've got a couple of options. Now, these are by no means the only options that you have. If you're using a slow feed hay net, you have to realize that in order for it to truly have the effect that we want in slowing down grazing behavior, slowing down intake, that those holes in that hay net need to be less than 1 inch in diameter. On the right-hand side, I've got a homemade version. It's a wooden box and it's got some mesh that floats down on top. What I would caution you about the one on the right is that metal mesh can actually be very abrasive to the horse's teeth. So if you're at all handy, go online. There are so many different options for slow feeders, but slow feeders are an ideal way to extend grazing mealtime, extend grazing behavior, and especially now when most of us may not be actually able to go to the barn and our boarding stables may have less staff working. So it's just not practical for them to be doing hay checks 3 and 4 times a day that your barn may have done before. So now's the time that using a slow feeder, sending one to your boarding stable may actually be a real benefit and a real help to them. So balanced horse feed examples. This is what we've said that we want to show you how to actually do this. How do we add forage to the diet? We've set the stage. It's really important for health and welfare, but how do we actually do it? Now, first thing I want to show you is, and we'll get it a lot in the questions at the end, people will say, well, what should I feed my horse? He's a senior horse or he's 14, whatever. This is all the information I need in order to help you answer that question of what do I feed my horse. If I am doing a nutrition consult with a client, these are the questions I ask. Number one, how old is your horse? Is it a growing baby? Is it mature? Is it a senior? Add into that, if you tell me it's a senior, what are the teeth like? Are they have good dentition or no dentition? Activity level. Is it a horse at maintenance, or are you actively riding this horse? And don't tell me the discipline you do, but actually how many hours a day do you ride your horse? And the do you do a lot of canter work or trotting or walking? Body condition, is your horse fat or thin? I'd like to probably see a picture. Current feed, what are you currently feeding? What hay are you feeding? What grain are you feeding? What supplements are you feeding? And I want to see it in pounds and ounces and not scoops, because as you can see from the picture on the bottom, everybody's scoop is completely different. Special needs, is your horse a quarter horse that has HYPP and needs to have low potassium? Is it got metabolic syndrome and we're concerned about sugars and starches? Are there allergies? And what are your goals in feeding your horse? Are you seeing some deficits that you want to correct? So these are all the things that you need to come prepared for with when you ask the question, what do I feed my horse? So I want to show you, this is actually a client that I did a nutrition consult. This was an Icelandic horse. And their goal was that you can see in the photograph, the horse is thin and doesn't have a lot of top line. And so the horse's body weight was 700 pounds. Body condition score, in my opinion, was a 3. Ideal is a 5 or a 6. So the horse definitely needed to gain weight. It was under moderate exercise. Poor quality hay, and I'll show you the hay test on the next slide, but it was definitely poor quality hay. And they're only getting 11 pounds a day. They were getting a balancer, a vitamin and mineral balancer pellet, and they were giving it half a pound a day, which probably wasn't outside of the feeding rate for this size of horse, but because of the quality of the hay, you can see that we were missing the mark on a lot of nutrients. And then they had a whole slew of other supplements that they had to add to the diet. So we're spending hours in the feed room to try and feed this horse. You can see we will look at this chart several times as I take you through these sample diets. So I'll orient you to it right now. All of the stuff on the bottom, DE stands for digestible energy, CP, crude protein, Ca, calcium, P is phosphorus, Cu is copper, Zn is zinc, Se is selenium. The next one seems to be a little squash, that's manganese. I is iodine, Ly is lysine. Then we have vitamin A and vitamin E are our last two columns. And the goal with this picture is that red line at 100%, we want each bar to hit 100% and not significantly go above that. 100% means 100% of that horse's nutrient, say digestible energy or phosphorus, is met in the diet. So in this diet, we can see that energy, crude protein, calcium, phosphorus, and lysine are all deficient in this diet. What does a horse need for body weight and for top line? He needs energy and protein, and immediately I see that these are deficient in this horse's diet. So we can take a look here at this forage, and it was a local orchard grass hay that she sourced from out here on the East Coast. It had about 8%, you can see in the orange box at the top there, 8% crude protein. Lysine was 0.3. The ADF and the NDF numbers were 44 and 74. Now these values are very high. ADF and NDF are measures of fiber, and they, in lay terms, are measures of palatability and digestibility. So this forage, these numbers, I want to see them in the 30s and 40s. So I want ADF to be in the 30s and NDF to be in the 40s. And you can see they're way higher than that. So this hay was not digestible and it wasn't very palatable. So she said she had a lot of wastage of this hay, and that was not surprising. So let's just say she couldn't change her current hay source, the primary quantity of hay. She couldn't change that in the diet. So we took it up to 15 pounds of that poor quality grass hay, but we added in 6 pounds of premium alfalfa, Standlee Premium Alfalfa. We bumped up the grass balancer pellet, the vitamin and mineral supplement pellet, and you can see now this diet is balanced. We're getting, because I want this horse to gain weight, I want to feed a little extra energy and protein, knowing that my goal is for this horse to gain weight. So you can see energy, DE, and CP are both above that red line because I want this horse to start gaining some weight. Let's just take that same horse, and his ideal body weight now is 750 pounds. He's doing the same exercise, and now I can change the hay. I can change my base hay to a better quality grass hay. So let's take Standlee Premium Timothy hay and feed him 15 to 20 pounds and my 1 pound of grass balancer. Now this is starting to look a whole lot less complicated. We're adding less ingredients, and this diet is really starting to shape up nicely. You can still see we're slightly above the energy and crude protein, but what I've done when I've balanced this diet is now I've put in my ideal body weight at 750. So this is a good diet for a horse at a body weight of 750 pounds, which is what I wanted him to get at. So you can see by adding better quality hay, this diet is saving this woman money because we have been able to cut out a boatload of other extraneous supplements by adding in better quality hay. Now, we certainly do not want to take away from necessary supplements and necessary grains, but we also want to simplify your life, and especially at this time where a lot of people are looking at ways to continue to feed their horse in a very healthy manner, but they're looking to save a little money. We don't want to add a lot of extra things that might be costing us money at this time. So that's looking at a horse doing moderate exercise. So of course, a horse doing light exercise and doing no exercise, we can easily balance that diet with really good quality forage as well, and probably not even have to bump up the balancer pellet. Now I wanted to show you the opposite end of the extreme. A standard bred or a thoroughbred doing intense exercise, the highest level of exercise that we can do, exercise done at high speed. If we feed this horse 20 pounds of that poor quality hay, in order to balance the diet, because this diet is balanced, but look what I've had to do in order to do that. I've had to feed 15 pounds of a race feed. Now, this is a race feed that I have formulated, so I know it's a very good quality race feed, but I just don't want to feed 15 pounds of it to my racehorse. So you can see if we change the quality of the forage again, and we go with a Standlee Premium Orchard Grass Hay at 15 pounds and add in some Standlee Premium Western Forage Alfalfa at 5 pounds, I've been able to bring that grain down to 10 pounds a day. And so this is better for the health of the horse. We're still going to need to add that grain in this diet for the speed, but we've been able to make this a healthier diet for the horse. And even my folks at that particular grain company would agree that we want to see our horses healthy long term, which means feeding realistic amounts of grain that are safe and healthy for the horse. So 46% reduction in grain from where we started, when we now split the difference between the two hay sources. We bumped up the amount of alfalfa to 10 pounds and the orchard hay to 10 pounds. So you can see here now we've bumped down the grain to 8 pounds. So finally, in the past, why did we start feeding grains to horses? Well, the energy demands of horses in the field, like here, those demands were high and time was short because they were exercising a lot. So they didn't have a lot of time to continually eat food all day long. Forage quality wasn't great then. They had limited grazing and it was difficult to transport. Oats, barley, beans, root vegetables were used in the diet because they were locally grown. So we've continued this thought process that you can't feed a forage-only diet to an intensely exercising horse. But I wanted to delve into that a little bit more and see if we could. So this was some research done in Sweden, and they looked at these standard bred trotting horses when they were breaking them in, and they fed them a high calorie forage only diet with a vitamin and mineral supplement, a balancer pellet. It had 1.3 megacalories per pound. It was 14% crude protein, and they consumed that at about 2.5% of their body weight. The results showed that these horses, these young horses, growing horses that were being broken in, they had the exact same growth rates as horses that were fed grain. They had the same body condition, and muscle glycogen was in the same range as their counterparts being fed grain. So we're not losing anything when it comes to athletic potential by just doing the forage only diet. They continued that study, and now the horses are 2 and 3, and they're actually starting to do more training. They're not just getting broken in, now they're doing training. We're continuing to feed them that high quality forage pellets. I'm adding in some pelleted alfalfa and the minerals to meet their requirements. And again, these horses, by feeding this forage-based diet, it didn't prevent muscle glycogen storage. That is a key when we're looking at exercising horses. They didn't get a big hay belly. It didn't alter their body condition score. And they had other exercise tolerances that were the same as their counterparts eating grain. So I took Standlee Premium alfalfa and a balancer pellet and some vegetable oil, and I show here that feeding 22 pounds of the alfalfa, 2.5 pounds of a balancer pellet, and 2 cups of vegetable oil a day, this diet is balanced in order to feed that horse doing intense exercise. Now, will they have enough carbohydrates in this diet to run at high speed? That is yet to be determined, but you can certainly balance their nutritional requirements with a high forage diet. So if you can do it for this horse, you can do it for any horse. Next poll question.
Okay, so our second polling question is, what do you currently feed your horse? If you have more than one horse with different needs, think of one to go with in particular, or whatever fits the group best as a whole. If you have more than one horse, if some happen to have similar feed programs. So the options you have here are forage only, forage and supplements, forage grain and supplements, or forage and grain. So go ahead and select your best answer here, and I'll give you guys a few moments to finish up before we close the poll. All right, it looks like almost everybody has answered. So we're going to close the poll now and share the responses. So Dr. Cubitt, we have 5% say forage only, 30% say forage and supplements, 38% say forage, grain, and supplements, and 27% forage and grain.
Perfect. Thanks for those results, Katie. And so I want to wrap up with a few research studies because we know that vet care is expensive. We know that there are going to always be mandatory vet visits for vaccinations, routine health care, but can we save some money by not having all of those extra vet care bills when potentially your horse has some kind of digestive upset? Are there ways that we can feed the horse that might make them healthier so that we might be able to cut back on those vet bills? So this was the first study, and I love this study. I think what it shows to me is that horses are smart. Even when we don't feed them the things they need, they will find it. So I want to orient you to this. If you look at the chart, the gray bars represent horses that were given a high fiber, low grain diet. The white bars represent horses were given a low fiber and high grain diet. So if we go to the end of the chart first, what you see is the amount of total time eating anything. And you can see that the two bars do not differ. So these horses, whether you gave them a lot of hay or a lot of grain, they spent the same amount of time eating total. But if we come back to the beginning of the chart, that those two bars are different, and they represent the total amount of time they spent eating the ration that we provided them. So the gray bars, horses that got a lot of forage, spent a lot more time eating. Makes sense, takes a lot more time to chew forage. The horses that got a lot of concentrate, a lot of grain, and not a lot of hay, they spent less time. Okay, makes sense. So what on earth did the horses that didn't get a lot of hay do for the rest of the time so that the observers said, well, they spent the same amount of total time eating? You know what they ate? They ate bedding and feces because they were craving fiber. And so they were trying to get fiber out of their feces and bedding. So my point is, even if we don't give horses enough fiber, they will find it. They will find it in sources that are not healthy and that we should not be encouraging. So make sure you're giving your horses plenty of fiber. Also, don't be afraid of giving horses a variety of different forage sources. Research has shown that giving horses a variety of different forages significantly and positively affected their behavior and promoted natural foraging grazing behavior. So it's not just that they're chewing all day long, it's that they're actually going from one to the other. And if we look at the hindgut microbiome, which is the bacteria that live in the hindgut, we know studies have shown that they thrive when there are varieties of forages supplied in the diet. So don't be afraid to give different types of forage. Finally, this study looked at ponies given fiber at different intake rates. They either fed 2% of their body weight, 1.5% of their body weight, or 1% of their body weight, or only 0.5% of their body weight. And on the right-hand column of my table, you can see the dry matter digestibility. So the top three values, 48, 50, and 49, they are right in line with the digestibility of forage. It's only about 50% digestible. Even the best quality hay is only about 50% digestible. What is very interesting, though, is when you feed less forage, digestibility of that forage goes down. These horses that weren't getting enough fiber in their diet, they're only getting half of their body weight, 0.5% of their body weight. Digestibility of that forage went down to 34%. And my conclusion to this is that there is a physical mechanism when the horse chews fiber. There are little muscular contractions throughout the whole digestive system that continue to push that food all the way through. So those muscles need to work just like muscles in your arm. And when you don't feed the horse enough, those muscular contractions start to die off. And that's what's happening here. We're not getting those contractions pushing the food through, and it decreases digestibility. So another reason, actual physical reason for why the health of the horse needs plenty of fiber in the diet and plenty of good quality fiber. Finally, this is looking at that microbiome. I mentioned earlier the microbiome, the bacterial population in the hindgut. There is a particular group of bacteria called Lachnospiraceae, and that's what we focused on in this. They had two groups of horses, adult and senior, and they fed them three different diets: a hay-only diet, a hay plus high carbohydrate diet, so it was 42% non-structural carbohydrates, and then a hay plus fat diet. What they showed is that when we started to increase these other ingredients, oils and fat and carbohydrates, we decreased that core community, that Lachnospiraceae, which is responsible for creating ingredients in the gut that protect the gut lining. So it's not to say we're not going to add fat and carbohydrates to the diet, but we need to make sure that we're feeding, number one, plenty of really good quality fiber, and then adding digestive supplements to make sure that we're boosting this bacteria when we're adding these other ingredients. So availability, none of this is important if we don't have availability. You can go on the Standlee website and you can click on the dealer locator or find a store, and you can click in your zip code here and they'll point you to the closest store. Now, what I want to point out is it's always a great idea, especially at the moment, just give your store that you're potentially going to a quick call just to make sure that they have the product in stock that you want. And if they don't, talk to them about getting it in for you. And finally, in these uncertain times, I know that everybody is concerned. Am I going to be able to get the ingredients that I need? Am I going to be able to get the hay that I want? You know, we had a little bit of a panic buy there for a minute, but I think people have settled back down. And Standlee, one of their non-negotiables, whether it's a pandemic or not, is assured supply. Their customers and consumers will always be able to access Standlee hay. And not only will they always be able to access it wherever and whenever they want, the quality is going to be consistent no matter where you buy it. So to summarize, what do horses need to be healthy? They need forage. How do we optimize the diet with forage? We need to feed them enough forage. I've given you a couple of examples of how to use better quality forage to decrease grain intake. There are ways that we can improve the horse's health by increasing the amount of forage we're feeding. And forage availability, Standlee is one of the best hay companies out there when it comes to quality and being able to source it wherever you need. They have a great distribution network. So finally, questions.
Thank you, Dr. Cubitt. Thank you so much for sharing some great insight into how we can improve the overall diet and gut health of our horses and properly balance a feed program for them. Before we jump into questions, I want to remind you to download the nutritional white papers that are available under handouts before we end the webinar. And then another reminder is we will also be drawing for the free product coupons following the Q&A session as well. So please continue to stick around for that. We're going to go ahead and get started on a few questions that we had submitted during today's presentation. Dr. Cubitt, the first question is from Liza, and this is a specific question that she is looking for some help with the feed program she currently feeds her horse. So I just want to preface you with that. But how do I know that my horse is getting the right amount of balancer? She is a coming 4-year-old AQHA, and she gets 2 pounds of balancer per day, as well as Standlee alfalfa pellets for added calories and preventative gut health. The bag label recommends she receives 1.5 to 2.5 pounds per day for her weight, so I've just been feeding right in the middle. Is there any obvious way of knowing if I should be feeding her more or less balancer? She has a body condition score of 5 and is in moderate exercise.
You know, without doing a hay test, because I'm assuming there was some hay there that you're then adding the balancer and the alfalfa pellets to. Without doing a hay test, it's really hard to know. But I would say that these balancer pellets across the board are designed to be fed between 1 and 2 to 2.5% pounds per day. So I think that because you're feeding 2 pounds a day, you're not noticing any issues, muscular issues, health issues with your horse. I would say that you're sitting perfectly there.
Okay, thank you. And Liza, if you have any other follow-up questions, don't be afraid to reach out to us later on that. Let's see, when considering fat, is beet pulp better than rice bran?
Oh, great question, great question. When considering pure fat calories, rice bran is going to have more calories than beet pulp. When considering the big picture, and if you don't have great quality hay in the horse's diet and you're trying to put some weight on them and get better quality fiber into the diet, because beet pulp is a super fiber, we call it a prebiotic because it's going to feed those hindgut bacteria and really stabilize that, then a combination of the two would be good.
Okay. All right, and Bettina would like to know, I feed round bales. Is there a good way to use a hay net for those?
Oh, great question. There are, so number one, with a round bale, you need to make sure that you're getting it from a good supplier and we don't have contaminants in it, i.e. dirt, dust, mold, weeds. Then you need to make sure that you've got enough horses in the field that they're going to be consumed within 5 to 7 days. Or they're in some kind of little hay hut thing that's going to protect them from the weather, because mold and dust can build up very easily in hay net in round bales. There are big round bale hay nets that you can source if you go online.
Okay. And Becky would like to know, are teff pellets a better alternative than alfalfa Timothy pellets?
Um, it depends on your goal. So it gets to that question, what is your goal and what is the horse that you're feeding? So let's just say you told me your horse is fat. It's doing light exercise, maintains his body weight very well. He's got metabolic issues, and my goal is to either maintain his body weight or decrease his body weight. Then the TEF would be perfect. If you said my horse is thin, he does light to moderate exercise and he has metabolic issues, and my goal is to keep the carbs low in the diet but increase his body weight, then alfalfa pellets would be better.
Okay. Rhonda would like to know, I'm not quite clear, is forage only okay? I've been feeding only Standlee Timothy pellets for 5 years, nothing else other than mineral and salt blocks.
Does your horse get hay and pasture? My concern when we just feed pelleted forage is and no other long stem hay, and I'm assuming your horse is at pasture, but let's just say you didn't have pasture availability or you weren't feeding some other hay source and you were just feeding 2.5% of your body weight in and Standlee pellets, they're going to consume that really quickly. So again, it can be done, and I do that with senior horses sometimes, but you have to manage that more intensely because now you've got to be going out there and giving them small meals often and kind of promoting that grazing behavior.
Okay. And there were a couple questions that came in. We are running short on time, and so I want to try to address as much as we can here very quickly. But there's a couple questions regarding how they can do a hay test on their local hay.
Oh, how you can do a hay test on your local hay. Number one, ask your feed company if they will do the hay test for you. Some of them will, some of them have their own forage testing labs. But beyond that, the gold standard is a lab in New York called Equine, and if you go online and search them, Equine, right on the website, it gives you a sampling technique and also the submittal form, and it'll run you anywhere from $25 to $50 depending on what you want to measure in your hay test, and you just mail it in and then they mail you back the results.
Perfect. Okay. So there's a few questions we're not going to get to, unfortunately, but don't worry, we will go ahead and reach out to you guys and make sure that we get your questions addressed, just because we don't have the opportunity to spend a little bit more time on questions today. So we will reach out to you, but um, we want to thank you, Dr. Cubitt, and then also thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate your time and your interest in wanting to learn more about nutrition for your animals. Before we wrap up, we are going to go ahead and announce, today we're going to select 2 winners. We've all been in kind of a difficult time right now, so what's better than 1 winner is 2. So the winners of today's, let's see, the winners of today's are Chuck Pitts and Sue. I'm so sorry, I am not going to pronounce your last name right, but Sefsik, I think. Congratulations, you guys. We will go ahead and reach out to you to get your contact information to be able to send those coupons out to you. So thank you very much. And if you have any other questions, aside from the ones that you guys entered into the questions panel today, that you might need some follow-up on, please reach out to Standlee's customer relations team. The phone number and email are available on this final slide. You can also find past webinars, more nutritional white papers, and other great information, including the Standlee Barn Bulletin blog and some other great tools to help identify what type of forage is best for your horse and how to optimize their diet on our website at standleeforage.com. And just to give you an idea, some of our previous webinar presentations have included beet pulp. What is it and why do horses need it? When quality hay is in short supply, what can I feed my horse, should I be concerned about feeding alfalfa, and many other great topics. So please check those out on our website if you have missed them previously. Today is the first day, I also want to mention, of our Feed Your Passion campaign. So if you head over to our website at standleeforage.com, you go under coupons, you will find an offer there for if you purchase one Standlee product, you get a $2 off coupon. So please go over there, check that out, and get that coupon. And that ends May 31st of 2020. And then we also have a coupon for our tough grass pellets for $3 off, and that ends June 30th of 2020. We will be having another webinar coming up here in the next couple weeks on the basics of horse nutrition and forages. And this is specifically for 4-H and FFA kids who are out of school right now and have canceled meetings. Anyone can join, but this is kind of our way of giving back on the education route for those that are missing out on some of those opportunities right now. This webinar is going to be a little more interactive with a worksheet that Dr. Cubitt has put together, and the students can fill it out during the presentation, and they're going to get some really good quality question and answer time in with Dr. Cubitt. So we're really looking forward to that coming up. We encourage students, 4-H leaders, FFA advisors, and parents to join in on the learning together. So make sure you're following us on Facebook and that you're added to our First Cut newsletter to know when that gets scheduled. So please share with your kids, your grandkids, students, or whoever you have in your life that might benefit from this fun learning experience. Please let them know about this. And lastly, when you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete that for us. Your feedback will really help us create better webinars for you and help us identify some great topics for future webinars. You will also receive a follow-up email within about 24 to 48 hours that has a link to view a recording of today's webinar if you would like to go back and reference what Dr. Cubitt spoke about today. The recording should be available for about a week following today's webinar and then available on our website under nutritional resources. So on behalf of Standlee Premium Western Forage and Dr. Cubitt, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we hope that you have a great rest of your week.